If you've ever considered how learning to plant seeds or tame wild animals has shaped every civilization, or if you're curious about how wheat, pigs, or even mold influence the development of humans, and if you're fascinated by the idea that civilization didn't just emerge, it grew, evolved, and was carefully bred, if so, then today's course just might be for you. Today I'll be reviewing the Great Courses series, Understanding the Human Factor, Life and Its Impact by Gary A. Sojka. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we're diving into a course that doesn't just ask what it means to be human, it actually traces the plants and animals, the microbes, and the various decisions that made civilization possible. I am building a second channel, History Unraveled with Dr. Duncan, where I produce both long-form videos and short, snappy introductions to key historical questions. That channel is designed as a supplement to a college-level world history course, but it's also meant for anyone who loves thoughtful, well-structured storytelling about the past. If that sounds interesting, please go check that out. And to prepare for that project, I've been working through a wide variety of courses from the Great Courses series, as well as a fair amount of the very short introduction series. You can check out both of those playlists if those sound interesting. And since these lectures function a lot like books, with defined themes, certainly some scholarly structure, and I think a lot of clear takeaways, then I am reviewing them here as well on this channel, Spencer Reads Everything, just like I do with really any other nonfiction book. And again, if that sounds interesting to you, then please check out more of my great courses, especially the Great Courses playlist. Today's course is Understanding the Human Factor, Life and Its Impact. It's an ambitious look at the origins and consequences of domestication. Not just how humans shaped the living world, but how the living world shaped us right back. Let me give you a quick bio of the author, Gary A. Sojka. I believe that's how you say his name. I know they said it at least once at the very beginning. That may have been the last time I heard it pronounced correctly, but just to give you an idea, Gary A. Sojka is President Emeritus and Professor Emeritus of Biology at Bucknell University. And in this lecture, as well as in all of his works, I'm assuming he brings an impressive blend of scientific expertise and real-world experience in all that he does. He earned his BA in biology with a minor in English from Cole College. He then went on to receive both his MS and PhD in biochemical genetics from Purdue University. He held a postdoctoral appointment at Indiana University Bloomington, where he rose from research associate to full professor and chair of the biology department, eventually serving as dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. After that, he eventually joined the faculty at Bucknell, where he was president for 11 years, and then he actually continued to teach after he left the presidency. And what I would say that makes him especially compelling as a teacher is the way that he combines academic depth with hands-on agricultural knowledge. And while he was serving as president, he continued to actually teach microbiology and lecturing in cell biology and general studies. And then even after he stepped down and continued teaching, I believe for another 11 years, he began breeding and raising endangered livestock with his wife. And the professor has served as president of the American Livestock Breeds Conservancy and the Philadelphia Society for Promoting Agriculture. And he has earned numerous teaching awards, including Indiana University's prestigious Frederick Bachman Lieber Memorial Award for Distinguished Teaching. With decades of experience in science, agriculture, and education, he brings a rare combination of scholarly rigor and practical insight to the question of how domestication has shaped human life. A lot of reasons why he is an excellent pick to teach a course like this. Just to give you an overview of what exactly this course covers before we dive into a lecture by lecture, well, it's not a full synopsis, but I will just tell you a little bit about each of the lectures. But this course in particular is a sweeping, multidisciplinary exploration of how human beings have shaped, as well as how they have been shaped by the domestication of plants, animals, and even microbes. The presenter takes us on a journey through the last 10,000 years, beginning with the Neolithic Revolution and moving all the way to the biotech innovations of today. The course is structured in three major parts. The first explores the origins of domestication, how and why early humans transitioned from hunter-gatherers to food producers. It discusses the archaeological, genetic, and environmental evidence for how people began settling into permanent communities and what allowed those communities to thrive. The second section is more focused on specific domesticated species. The professor covers major plant groups like cereal grains and legumes and garden vegetables, as well as animals like sheep and goats and pigs and horses and cattle and dogs and cats, and his personal favorite, chickens. He explains Not just how these species were domesticated, but also how they shaped cultural practices, as well as labor systems and even religious ideas, and even some personality traits of societies. Finally, the course turns to modern developments. It examines agricultural science in the Age of Enlightenment, the Mendelian genetics, the Green Revolution, and biotechnology. And the professor doesn't shy away from big questions. He asks how industrial agriculture affects the planet and how we engineer life in labs and whether our current food systems are sustainable. And throughout, he presents domestication as a mutualistic relationship, one where both humans and domesticates benefit as well as evolve and adapt together. And this course ultimately invites you to rethink civilization itself as a product not only of invention or conquest, but of intimate and deliberate relationships between humans and the living world around them. So with that, let me give you a quick synopsis of each of the lectures. Sometimes I group them together. In this case, I thought I would just give you the name of the lecture and then maybe a one-sentence little summary that I thought as I was listening to them. And so this is my lecture by lecture rundown of this course. Lecture 1, Man the Domesticator. In it, he introduces the central premise that domestication has been the most transformative human activity, enabling civilization and shaping both humans and their domesticates. So it gives you the broad presentation of what the whole course is about. Lecture 2, The Beginnings of Domestication. In this, he explores how domestication began as a mutual evolutionary relationship between humans and certain plants, as well as some animals and microbes that met us halfway, as he explains it. Lecture 3, The Basis for Settled Communities, he examines how agriculture laid the foundation for permanent settlements, social organization, and eventually the rise of civilizations. Lecture 4, The Dispersal and Spread of Agriculture, describes how agriculture spread from key points of origin to dominate global food production, displacing hunter-gatherer societies. Lecture 5, Agriculture Impacts Ecology and Geology. He analyzes the long-term ecological consequences of agriculture, from deforestation to irrigation-induced salinization and erosion. Lecture 6, You Are What You Eat, Raise, and Build, shows how humans were also shaped by domestication, with cultural values, time management, and belief systems reflecting their domesticated species. Lecture 7, The Domestication of Cereal Grains. It details how key cereal grains like wheat, barley, rice, and maize became staple crops that fueled human population growth. Lecture 8, The Oligarchy of the Garden Patch, focuses on how a small group of easily cultivated plants like legumes and squash dominate global diets despite the vast diversity of wild plants. In this one, he emphasizes that there is actually a wide variety of foods that you could eat as a human being, but we have chosen to only have a very small portion of them be a common part of our diets. Lecture 9, The Importance of Storage Crops. He explains how the ability to store food through winter months was essential to survival and led to the prominence of root crops and food preservation. Lecture 10, 3 of Man's Best Friends. In this one, he highlights the ancient domestication of dogs, cats, and chickens, and their unique roles in human societies across the globe. Lecture 11, The Common Barnyard Domesticates, covers the domestication and ongoing significance of barnyard animals like sheep, goats, pigs, horses, and cattle. Lecture 12, this is halfway through the course, Land Races, Breeds, and Strains. He clarifies how humans classify and refine domesticates from naturally occurring land races to carefully bred modern strains and varieties. In Lecture 13, The Columbian Exchange, he explores the massive biological and cultural exchange between the old and new worlds after 1492, which reshaped global agriculture and disease landscapes. And it is here that he makes the point that a lot of people don't consider, that when you think of stuff like Italian food and the tomato sauce that is very common to it did not exist. The tomato was not in Italy until after the Columbian Exchange. Same with potatoes in Ireland. And I could go on because so much changed after 1492. Lecture 14, Plants that Influenced Global Culture, discusses culturally transformative plants like tea, coffee, tobacco, and chocolate, and their impact on social life and trade. And make note that none of those are essential for survival. All of those are excess commodities. Lecture 15, Agriculture in the Age of Reason. In this one, he looks at how Enlightenment thinkers, including statesmen like Washington and Jefferson, who are, of course, famous for not only being founders of the United States, but for being plantation owners, which includes a lot of things pertaining to agriculture, including the labor that was used to run these agricultural plantations. And it also discusses how advanced agriculture as a rational scientific pursuit was a key element of the Enlightenment. Lecture 16, Darwin, Galton, and Mendel. In this one, he traces the early foundations of evolutionary biology and genetics and their impact on selective breeding of plants and animals. And I'll say now, you might be surprised on his thoughts on Darwin. Not that they're necessarily negative, but he adds a little more to the story that you may not have considered in terms of the lasting legacy of the theory of evolution as presented by Darwin and others. Lecture 17, some notable scientific plant breeders. In this, he profiles pioneering plant breeders whose scientific approaches transformed agriculture and helped feed a growing world population. I think Norman Borlaug was the big name in that, although I believe he came up a couple of times. Another one was George Washington Carver, and I thought that that was a fascinating lecture. I'm relatively familiar with George Washington Carver, but when he presented it, I was just all the more impressed by the end of the lecture. Lecture 18, Farming the Waters. In this, he introduces aquaculture as an increasingly important form of domestication, highlighting fish, mollusks, and other aquatic species. Lecture 19, Domesticated Mice, Molds, and Microbes. This one expands the ideas of domesticates to include laboratory animals and beneficial microbes that we use in foods and medicines and biotechnology, thinking of stuff like penicillin. Lecture 20, Our Technology-Based Global Food System. In this one, he examines the rise of global food production and networks and the infrastructure that supports modern agriculture and long-distance trade. Lecture 20, Engineering Our Domesticates. In this one, he delves into genetic engineering and biotechnology, exploring how humans now redesign domesticates at the molecular level. Lecture 22, Novel Delivery Systems and Spare Parts. This one explores futuristic possibilities like edible vaccines and organ harvesting from genetically modified animals. Lecture 23, The Age of Industrial Farming. In this one, he analyzes the effects of industrialized agriculture, including mass production as well as monoculture and the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, all of which are hot button topics to this day. Lecture 24, The Path Forward. In this lecture, the final lecture, he concludes with a discussion on sustainability, environmental responsibility, and how the future of civilization depends on our stewardship of the human-domesticate relationship. And that's all 24 lectures. Sorry, I could not go into more detail on each of them, but 24 is a decent amount of lectures, and there is a lot of great stuff in each of them. So what I like to do is give you what are some of the overarching arguments that he makes throughout those 24 lectures. There could be more arguments that I didn't necessarily write down. I'm not aware that they are key arguments being had in this space right now. I'm not an expert on this field, but these were some things that popped out to me, and I just wanted to point them out. I think that is an important part of understanding an academic's work, is not just what they specialize in, but specifically what arguments they make, even on a broad presentation like this one. So here are some of the key intellectual moves or provocative claims that the professor makes throughout the series. First of all, he argues that domestication is mutualistic, not mastery. Repeatedly, he challenges the notion that humans control nature. Instead, he argues that true domestication is a two-way relationship. Plants and animals that thrived did so because they met humans halfway. Prime example of that, of course, being dogs. They came from wolves, and they did not just one day decide that they would come and live with humans and vice versa. Humans did not just go and kidnap wolves and say, you will now be a pet of ours. Instead, bit by bit, we had certain wolves, possibly some smaller wolves that were being left out of their packs, some wolves that for one reason or another started to scavenge a little closer to the camp. And so then the hunter-gatherers would then maybe start to feed them some scraps because they found some kind of benefits. Maybe the wolves acted as protection, whether it was incidental or just having wolves around helped to keep away other animals, or maybe they provided some kind of an alarm system if a bigger animal did come. And so you eventually get some kind of halfway connection to the humans before the humans and the domesticate have this mutualistic relationship that we now are very familiar with, especially with animals like dogs. Another argument he makes is that domestication was civilization's prerequisite. The course takes a strong stance that permanent settlements and cities and law codes and even religion could not have existed without the stability provided by domesticates. That, of course, does not apply to just domesticated animals. That is also, of course, referring to domesticated plants. Those are both considered domesticates. He also argues that food systems shape cultural identity. He argues that societies shaped by sheep are different from those shaped by pigs or wheat, and these differences go well beyond diet. They extend to timekeeping and to work habits and even how people structure their gods and social hierarchies. He also argues that modern industrial farming is not a natural endpoint. The professor critiques the idea that industrial agriculture is a culmination of progress. Instead, he raises many questions about sustainability and resilience and the wisdom of depending on monocultures and global supply chains. And finally, he argues that domestication is broader than we think. By including stuff like microbes and molds and even lab mice, the professor expands the definition of domestication into the modern biotech era, arguing that our manipulation of life is accelerating, not ending. There were quite a few interesting things throughout this lecture series. One of the things I really appreciate about this was just how many different topics he touched upon. And so here were just a few of the fun facts that I pulled away. I will, of course, as I read them, decide if I still think they're fun facts. But anyways, one thing that he points out is that the modern domesticated dog, many people probably already know this, evolved from wolves that scavenged near human camps, and the beginning of this process probably happened as early as 35,000 years ago. Another interesting fact was barley was likely the original gladiator food. Roman gladiators bulked up on barley and not meat. In modern days, when we think of putting on some muscle mass, we almost always think of eating lots of meat. Also, all modern domestic cats may descend from a single domestication event of a Middle Eastern wild cat, and it likely self-domesticated by hanging out where humans stored grain. It could kill mice. Humans found that beneficial, and so they did not chase them away. Another interesting fact, yogurt probably predates written language. It forms naturally in raw milk thanks to lactic acid bacteria. So we, I believe, have examples from clay pots of yogurt. There's at least a remnant of it, or some evidence of yogurt that is older than our examples of writing. The potato's introduction to Ireland made it so central to the diet that a single blight nearly collapsed the population structure. You may be familiar with the potato famine that led many Irish to come to the Americas. Cereal grains are a tiny sliver of plant biodiversity. Yet wheat, rice, and maize provide the majority of calories consumed by humans globally. Yet there are so many other plants we could be eating if we wanted to. Another interesting fact, there are over 400 recognized varieties of cheese, many of which are closely linked to regional environments and the animals and the microbial strains of those locations. Early humans may have domesticated animals not for food, but for transport, as well as dung and hides and companionship. So pick any of those. I'm confident that only the last one will appeal to most of your modern humans, but hey, they were all possible reasons for domestication. But the idea of domestication for meat, as we think of many of our most popular domesticated animals like cows and chickens and goats and sheep, a lot of that actually probably came later. The idea of raising them for meat may not have been quite as appealing considering how many resources it would have taken to first start using animals in that way. Instead, it was all these other things that appeared to be beneficial. Napoleon offered 12,000 francs to anyone who could preserve food for long military campaigns. And the winner was Nicolas Appert, who invented essentially the origins of canning. This is important because food storage has become a key element of creating our massive global supplies for food. This is why you can live in the United States and get all sorts of produce that comes from nowhere near the United States. And of course, that is going to be something facilitated by a long legacy of creating ways that food can be preserved for long periods of time. Another one, chickens were likely spread around the globe by ships, as sailors brought them aboard to control rodents and supply fresh eggs at sea. And as they would be introduced to a new place, they were frequently well tended to and would grow. And we now find chickens all over the world, and they are, I believe, the most popular form of protein, at least animal protein. Probably. I don't know. I'll have to look that up though. So here's my final summation of this. I mean, I did really enjoy this series. It's one of those courses that manages to be both broad in scope, but still very rich in detail, which is not always easy to do. And I thought that the professor, again, I will try to say his name, Gary Sojka, is clearly a deeply intelligent and thoughtful presenter. And one thing that really impressed me was his ability to bring together so many disciplines. We're looking at anthropology, archaeology, genetics, microbiology, and history. And he did this all into a coherent narrative about how humans and other living organisms have shaped one another. Of course, a lot of what he covers is theoretical, and I don't say that dismissively. It's just the nature of a course like this. When you're talking about events and processes that stretch back over tens of thousands of years and across continents, and some degree of interpretation is unavoidable. And I just think that means that if you are going to consider this course or listen to this course, then there's a good chance that you may come away with a lot of different ideas, and some of them over time may be proven otherwise. And I don't think that's necessarily a knock on the professor. I just think the amount of things he's dealing with that involves a heavy dose of theory is maybe going to affect the longevity of some of these theories. I would also say, though, that the professor introduces a wide variety of possibilities and evidence with a lot of clarity and curiosity that should give you a lot to think about and to consider. I also really appreciated the moments when he had some personal stories that slipped through. You know, references to raising endangered livestock or his experiences as a kid. And I just thought that as that showed through, it gave a little more character than just seeing him as some boring, bland academic. And I certainly appreciated his love of agriculture, the natural world, that remains central to who he is. And I thought that personal passion really added warmth and authenticity to the lectures. So who is this for? Well, this course is perfect for lifelong learners who enjoy big picture thinking as well as multidisciplinary explorations. If you're curious about how biology, history, and culture intersect, especially through something as deceptively simple as farming, I think this series will absolutely resonate with you. It's also great for teachers and students or general history buffs who want to better understand the long arc of civilization from a biological and ecological standpoint. If you've ever read Jared Diamond or Yuval Noah Harari, or you maybe have loved a documentary that connects human development to the environment, this is very much in your wheelhouse. And if you're a fan of the great courses in general, this is one of the more intellectually expansive offerings out there, I would argue. It has quite a large scope of information that it is touching upon. So who is this not for? Well, this course probably isn't for people looking for a chronological narrative. It's also not a good fit for those who want a firm conclusion at every turn. A lot that's covered is theoretical, as well as some being speculative, or many times the fact that it's drawn from cross-disciplinary synthesis could leave it at a disadvantage in terms of defense of itself. So if you just want somebody to tell you what to think without exploring data, this may not be for you either. I would say all in all that this course, again, the name of it is Understanding the Human Factor, is one of those courses that potentially reshapes the way that you look at the world. It reminds you that civilization wasn't built with bricks and laws alone, but is also built with stuff like wheat and sheep and the microbes and 1,000 subtle choices about how we interact with the living world. The author, Gary Sojka, brings that story to life with a blend of scholarly depth and personal warmth that makes this a very memorable course. If you've watched or listened to this course or have thoughts about domestication or agriculture or the development of human societies, please, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more from me on this topic or related topics, again, please check out my other channel, History Unraveled with Dr. Duncan. And if you're enjoying this video or any of my videos, please share them. The more people that know about this channel, the more videos I can make. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.